1982 would start late for John Henry. Still basking in the glory of his 3 titles as 1981's Horse of the Year, Champion Alder Horse, and for the 2nd straight year, Champion Grass Horse, John Henry was back on the track, preparing to defend his title in the Santa Anita Handicap, a race that no horse had ever won twice in its previous 44 runnings.
They turn for home. On the outside, here comes John Henry. John Henry on the outside, between horses Perot. It's the 1/3 at the rail, and down the stretch they come. On the rail, it's Perot. John Henry on the outside. Those two are going to battle the wire. John Henry on the outside, Perot at the rail. Noses apart.
Perot, trained by Charlie Whittingham, racing on the inside, won the photo. But John Henry won the race on a steward's disqualification. John Henry had become the first 2-time winner of the Big Cap and had run his string of victories at Santa Anita to an incredible 11 in a row over a 4-year period. There would be only 4 more starts and 1 more victory in all of 1982 for John Henry as he scored his 3rd straight triumph in the Oak Tree Invitational at Santa Anita. That was followed by a 3rd-place finish in the Meadowlands Cup, and then the disastrous trip to Japan to run in the Japan Cup.
The decision to send him to Japan was only one of ego. I had grown up in business there, and the people there had always been very good to me, and I'd made some good friends, and I thought I would like to have them see my horse. They were writing to me about it, and I was sending them pictures. So I decided again, as I told you before, Marge Everett said to me, Sam, don't send the horse to Japan. He's too old a horse for that. And 3- and 4-year-olds should make a trip like that, not an older horse. And she was 100% right.
Nothing went right, from the delays in shipping and a 30-hour trip to Tokyo, to quarantine, to an almost fatal bout with muscle seizures.
And it was a mistake. He didn't run for 7 months after that.
John Henry lost more than just time away from the races. He also lost his rider, Bill Shoemaker.
John Henry had been off for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and I honestly didn't think that he could come make it back. And even if he did, Charlie had a lot more better horses than McAnally at that time, so that's how I wind up not riding John Henry anymore.
Enter yet another Hall of Fame rider, Chris McCarron. He would end up with more mounts on John Henry than any other jockey, 14.
And the first time I ever sat on his back was a week before the American Handicap in 1983, and he worked a mile here on the turf course at Hollywood Park in 1:35 and change. He ran 7 days later. His mile time for the race, which actually was a 1.8 mile race, but his mile time for the race was 1:36 and change. It was just incredible. And he won that race very easily, too, by the way.
Although he would have only 5 races in all of 1983, a close second in the Arlington Million, and a victory in the Hollywood Turf Cup Invitational would be enough to earn him an Eclipse Award as the year's top male turf horse. John Henry was the most dominant turf horse of the first half of the 1980s. He started in 32 grass races, winning 22, including 9 Grade 1s. At age 9, he was ready to go out a champion. His 1984 championship run began in the Grade 1 Hollywood Invitational, a race he first won back in 1980.
They're at the top of the stretch. Loose Ends with a short lead. Then it's load to cannons. Galavert on the outside. John Henry moving between horses. With 1/8 of a mile to go, there's 4 horses battling for the lead. Here comes John Henry moving along the rail, and Galavert on the outside. Galavert on the outside. John Henry on the inside. John Henry with a short lead. And John Henry does it again. Winner of the Invitational in 84 by a neck.
Now John Henry returned to Arlington Park in Chicago, the 4th running of the Million. And Chris McCarron was remembering his 1983 loss there by a neck.
He had the same kind of trip that I had on him the year before, where I was laying fairly close. I was just a few lengths off the lead and in good striking position. And I had the same horse in front of me, Nijinsky's Secret, who had a habit of trying to lug out on the turn, and that kind of cost me the race the year before. But in the 84 edition of the Arlington Million, John was able to go ahead and go on by Nijinsky's Secret with great ease, and he won pretty comfortably. He beat Royal Heroine, who was a really top filly. I think she went on to win the Breeders' Cup Mile later that year.
The victory made John Henry the first thoroughbred to ever go over the $5 million mark in career earnings. At age 9, he had won a Grade 1 in the West, the Midwest, and now was looking east to Belmont Park in the Grade 1 Turf Classic. was a great way to say goodbye to New York.
John Henry looking great past the 8-pole lead, still by a head. Wind on the outside, won't give up. There's Red alongside in second. 3 to the mare, all along. Then Majesty's Prince. John Henry on the rail, still has a lead. Wind on the outside, second. John Henry in front.
The vote for John Henry as 1984 Horse of the Year over Slew of Gold was as close as his win in the Turf Classic. In his final year of racing, John had won 6 of 7 races on the grass, setting one course record equaling another, as he claimed his 4th turf title of the 80s. There was something new introduced to racing in 1984, the Breeders' Cup Championship Series. But John Henry would miss the opportunity to run in that first $2 million Breeders' Cup turf, as Lashkari was pulling off a 53-1 upset of 1983 Horse of the Year all along. John Henry was back in his stall at Hollywood Park, nursing damaged suspensory ligaments in both forelegs. The cumulative effect of 8 seasons of training and a total of 83 races over 19 different racetracks from coast to coast and halfway around the world had finally taken its toll. On Sunday, July 21st, 1985, John Henry was officially retired.
Probably one of the most touching moments in my whole career with him was the day that we unloaded him in Kentucky at the horse park. And it was starting to get dark at night. And Jose took him out in this paddock, this 5-acre paddock there that he still has now. And we slowly slipped the shank off him and started backing away, walking backwards. And John just stood there in the middle of that paddock and he let out the loudest roar. He just whinnied his head off. And exactly what he was thinking, what was going through his mind, and I sensed it, as we were leaving him.
In retirement at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington, John Henry could look back on his last year of racing, 1984, as his very best. At age 9, he had the biggest money-winning season of his career, earning over $2.3 million and capping it with a 2nd Horse of the Year title. So what made this unlikely, unwanted thoroughbred a legend?
I think his compatibility was one of his biggest assets. He just knew what he had to do, and he would beat you.
He would not lose a fight. If he got hooked in a fight and he had any energy left at all, he'd beat the horse to the wire. It didn't matter what horse it was or under what conditions. He was a tenacious fighter.
Well, I think I've ridden some horses that were maybe better horses, but none that were as professional, and none that lasted as long as he did, and none that had the charisma for the public that he did.
And he embellished the sport of kings. The ugly gelding that no one wanted had run and won for 8 years, from 1977 through 1984, at 19 different racetracks, and earned 7 year-end Eclipse championships. This thoroughbred, that once was purchased for $1,100, ended his career with earnings of more than $6.5 million. In summing up John Henry's remarkable career and his impact on thoroughbred racing, Joe Hirsch, the executive columnist of the Daily Racing Form, wrote, John Henry was not the best racehorse, not the fastest, nor the busiest, not the greatest weight carrier, not the handsomest thoroughbred, nor certainly the most personable. But John Henry was the most remarkable horse who ever raced anywhere. John Henry showcased all of those remarkable traits in the richest race of his career, under the lights of the Meadowlands in New Jersey, the Ballantyne's Scotch Classic in the fall of 1984. Uncharacteristically, 8th the first time past the stands, 8th in the backstretch, 5th on the far turn, and then the greatness in what was to be his final race exploded.
This is John Henry out in the far outside, and he's flying, and down the stretch they come.
William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, Act 2, Scene 5. Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great.
Here they come to the finish, and here's John Henry in front.
Some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them.